Stop that. Stop that. Stop that. I hear him chat to the noise. Move too quick, can't stop for the talking. I hear him chat with the walking. Just too sharp with the prize. White girls better tell me I'm awesome, yeah. Hot like fire on the pan. If you wanna touch my please use caution. Cold like 0 degrees. I'm out the cage, gotta let out the beast. Revolutionary, gotta let out the streets. Locked in a cage, I'ma let out the sheets. You can't go one man, forget my peace. You take the west side, take on the east. I'ma put him in the cage, never let out the. I hear him chat to the noise. Move too quick, can't stop for the talking. I hear him chat with the boys. Not so tough, but mans keep walking, yeah. Just too sharp with the prize. White girls better tell me I'm awesome, yeah. Hot like fire on the pan. If you wanna touch me, please use caution. Stop that. Stop that. Stop that.
I've got a bit of a problem on my hands, and it's not just that it's a Greg Cody Tuesday.
I thought that was the problem.
Yes, Greg, the chemical ingredients of Greg Cody, who comes in frazzled and late and interested in nothing but selling his new book. He has no other interest today. Usually it's just his podcast. As he physically, right before we, not even before we go on television, as we're on the broadcast, he is wiping the sleep from his eyes, something he could have done before we started. But the problem that I have on Tuesday, Stugotz, is generally speaking, as a show, we dominate the sports market in narcissism. Okay? We've got so many people at microphones, so many narcissists at microphones. And in Lucy, Jeremy, and Roy, and Cody today, we have 4 people who haven't been able to give any opinions at microphones about college football. And today, they have not been allowed to do so yet. Unfortunately, we covered all this terrain yesterday, and somehow Stephen A. Smith took the best of all the takes. We don't have to have any more takes. The best take there is that if everything were exactly the same and Deion Sanders was the coach at FSU, FSU would be in that playoff.
That's why Stephen A. is the GOAT. I mean.
But we have other people who wish to speak on such matters, and Lucy's the only one among us who was at the actual game in bad seats at a terrible tailgate.
She did speak. I mean, you must not listen to God Bless Football on Max, but she did speak yesterday about the selection.
Max.
Oh, it's not.
It's on DraftKings Network and on YouTube.
That's unfortunate.
.com/@LeBatard Show.
All right.
Maybe one day. Maybe we were
And
the
Spotify.
We were the well. You can't tell whether it's on Spotify or not because the numbers
We're
have been
fixing
jerry
that,
rigged.
and you should probably stop doing that. Please.
Lucy, although your thoughts on God Bless Football are the place where people can get your thoughts first, before we play what it is that you bring us from an SEC tailgate that was disappointing to you, yes?
Yeah, it was the worst tailgate we've been to the whole year. And it's not, I don't think it has anything to do with Alabama fans or Georgia fans. I think it's just straight up Mercedes-Benz Stadium and the way that Atlanta is set up. It was just not built for tailgating. It was not built for the SEC. It was kind of a bummer.
I have not yet given my top 4, although I did vote for the Heisman yesterday.
Really?
Who'd you vote for?
Iowa's punter?
Isn't it embargoed? You get in trouble if you reveal.
Gosh, Lucy, I wish you had been here yesterday because I would have put Iowa's punter. I would have given him a vote. There's only one joke on my ballot, and that's not the joke. Well, there's only one joke at the top of my ballot, and that joke is not one I made, but
Where it says name.
I wish I had put I was punter as one of my Heisman.
Would have been great.
Heisman finalists.
Missed opportunity.
He had a weekend. Woo, he had a weekend.
I mean, every weekend's a weekend for him, right?
He's a star. I'm going to miss him so much.
I said this yesterday, and I will say it again. I cannot begin to tell you how difficult it is and easy it is to bet the team total under on Iowa under 6.5. Under Iowa will not score 7 points. They will not get 2 field goals and a safety. The best they're going to do is 2 field goals. I can't tell you how hard that is to bet, and yet how often that bet cashes.
I think there was some stat that came out that, if you had bet, $100 on the Iowa under since the Purdue game and rolled it over, you had, $23,000.
Jesus.
They've done it 11 straight times. They've gone under 11 straight times. on that. But Greg Cody is here, and his book is a bona fide bestseller, The Pride of a Lion with Ron McGill. And now we're in the wheelhouse of Greg Cody. Look at the smile that emerges over his face there, because it's the only reason he's here.
I mean, bestseller. Give the man some credit.
BS. Bestseller.
Do you have a back in my day today?
I actually don't. No, I put that on the show topics. I guess you didn't get that far down.
It's the holidays.
Yeah, the holidays.
I mean, book release day, right?
Yeah, it is. I
right.
mean, it's a national
big
holiday.
day.
Is it the holidays already? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
December 5th.
Yeah, you didn't have Thanksgiving. Yeah. Isn't that a holiday?
There's a nice little wide lane in between the holidays where I feel like we can get one.
Yeah, the holidays begin with Halloween.
Yeah.
Halloween?
They accelerate with Thanksgiving.
Yep.
And then they go into overdrive once all the holiday lights are up and everybody's buying the Pride of a Lion, as a gift. I mean, it's we're into high gear now.
So if the malls are decorated for the holiday season,
Yes.
there will never be a back in my day.
Right.
during
Well,
that period.
there's an exception to every rule, but right now we plan to come back with a vengeance in January with a brand new back in my day.
That's
A month from now?
Wow.
terrible.
But Martin Luther King Day.
You're punting on an entire
Right, good
month?
point, yeah.
That is bad form.
I'm punting like the Iowa punter.
You know what's funniest about that? Just last week, I mean, we've had conversations, him and I, because the business of this is infuriating and soul-crushing for me. But for a couple of years now, Greg Cody has been complaining quietly, or I shouldn't say complaining because he hasn't volunteered much at this, but reminding me that he wasn't being paid. And most recently, I had to ask him, hey, did we get that all sorted out? And he's like, yeah, a lot more than I expected. And what's the reward? No back in my day.
He wrote a book, though. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, a man can only do so much.
That we published for him.
right.
Oh, you did? You own Mango? I didn't realize that. I'm not familiar with the business workings of Meadowlark. Congratulations for buying Mango Publishing.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I don't often get congratulations for all the things that we own.
So you get a percentage of sales of Greg's book?
We do.
Oh.
Because we all own this company.
Huh.
Very nice.
Well, thank you, Greg.
What did I do?
Well, you wrote the book.
I mean,
Well,
I'll take
true, but-
you writing a book that goes directly into my pockets over you writing it back in my day.
There you go. See, that's the man. Mike gets it. He gets it.
I do, Greg.
Thank you. You get nothing extra from back in my day. Apparently, you do get something extra from the Pride of a Lion.
I was excited to learn that.
Okay,
Let's
I know.
see exactly
So
where
was
this
I.
book is ranked.
I am happy to have Greg Cody here because while we'll have to wait for Jeremy and Lucy and Roy's new college football takes, and I don't want any of Greg Cody's college football takes, what I do want, though, is Greg Cody's maximum homerness around everything that's happening with the Miami Dolphins. I want to put up for
Big loss for the Jags last night.
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
well,
Now, even that's crazy. All right, I woke up this morning because I did not watch that game to find out that a 4-team teaser that I had with Jacksonville +2 that couldn't lose last night. Couldn't lose last night.
Unless you took it.
Jacksonville +2 cannot lose unless football happens to the Jags at the top of the conference. And not only happens, Stugotz, but this part is fascinating, and the injuries and the pain in that sport have been normalized. But now 4 of the top 7 playoff teams in the AFC are going to play this week if Trevor Lawrence doesn't play with their backup quarterback.
Crazy.
Like, this is what you head into the playoffs with, right? You can have the top seed, and if Tua gets hurt between now and then, you're going to be bleeped. The season's going to go to hell. So all you're doing here is trying to make sure that Tua stays healthy because now Trevor Lawrence is limping off the field, and you don't know how long he's out for.
No. They'll just have a committee. Put Justin Herbert in.
I'm with the idea of just putting a committee in charge of more things and having sports be more about committees instead of less.
wow.
Here's the thing about committees. They don't know shit either. If you would have asked the committee who wins Monday Night Football last night, they're all saying Jacksonville. That's what's the beauty of all of this stuff. No one had Cordell Jones lifting a national championship.
You're right. Chris and I were discussing yesterday, we'd like a committee to determine who wins the NFC South.
Not a joke.
Put it on the poll, please, at Le Batard Show. Should we have a committee to decide who wins the NFC South? And furthermore, second question, should that committee be allowed to pick a team from another division to win the NFC South?
The answer is nobody. Nobody should win from the NFC South. There's 2 divisions in football that are so bad, they should not have a playoff team. They should restructure the entire division format and reward teams with better records. And I'm not saying if, as a wild example, if you go 13-0 in college football, it automatically means you should be in the CFP. But in the NFL, you can't have a 500 team in the playoffs when you're leaving out teams with much better records.
I just looked at the standings and could not believe that the Atlanta Falcons are in first place.
Yep,
the
crazy.
Atlanta Falcons are going to be a playoff team. What a disaster.
What's the second division, Dad? NFC South and which one?
I believe the AFC South. I don't have
Houston?
it in front of me.
Well, the
And the
Jags
Jags?
are
The
8-4. The Colts are 7-5. They have
They might have
the
3
Texans
playoff
with
teams.
CJ
They've
Stroud. Right.
They've got
I feel like you got
teams
caught.
over 500.
You got caught up in the air there with 2 teams.
AFC
Yeah,
South's been really
AFC
bad
South,
for a
yeah.
long
You could make
time.
the argument the AFC East is worse than the AFC South.
Oh,
It
really?
is,
The Dolphins
yeah.
would like a word.
Just saying.
Greg, that's pretty terrible, though, as our football expert, though, that you don't remember the name of the division,
Yeah.
that you don't know who's in it, that you don't remember what you're talking about a sentence
Okay,
ago.
I made a mistake. I'm a human, particularly on book release day. It's a national holiday for me.
Big day.
It only happens once a lifetime, Dan. I'm a little excited.
Yep.
Well, Finn's in 50.
Yeah. So it's happened twice.
Don't get me started on that.
It's your second book. What do you mean? What do you?
But the first one he knows that's going to sell.
Wait a minute, but Finn's, what are you rolling your eyes? Finn's at 50. We are thrilled to have you today because you are the definitive historian and chronicler of local Miami Dolphins lore.
Yes.
You and Dave Hyde are elbowing Alan Pupar, and who's the other guy you're elbowing? Trying to get out of the way. Who's Tom Curtis?
Tom Curtis.
TC.
There are like 4 of you that are
Harvey Green.
to be Dolphin historian.
Right, yeah.
You're the only one who has written Fins at 50, and you're rolling your eyes at your other book.
Well, Finn's at 50. I don't think Meadowlark. There was no Meadowlark then. I don't think Dan Le Batard owned a publishing company at that time because the book was published by Miami Herald Publishing, who did no promotion for the book. Yes, and I'm calling out my own newspaper. Fins at 50 came out and just sat there because the Miami Herald did not get behind that book and did not promote it in the least.
Calling them out on release day is a choice.
Well, but we're seeing the opposite now.
Right.
This book is being well promoted by this show, by Mango, by everyone involved. I wish Fins at 50 had been.
Is there any profit that can be gathered for the shipping container in us right now resuscitating Fins at 50 with whatever sales are after today?
Congratulations are in order because according to Barnes & Noble, your book is the #1 bestseller in biology of cats, lions, and tigers.
That a boy.
I didn't know there were so many obscure categories. I've seen it #1 in 4 or 5 different categories, but they're all like sub categories.
Don't apologize.
But
They're
that's
making
okay.
#1 is #1,
Okay,
Greg.
yeah, you're
Yes.
right.
But
You're
those
right.
profits
it's not #1 if there are 40 #1s, though. #1 is not #1 if there are 40
Your
of
book
them.
is available at Target.
The extra profits that we're going to get from
Tracks.
that Fins at 50 that's going to go right back up, are we going to get those trickle down sort of like the merch store?
I'm glad you asked, actually, because I've got more merch store complaints
Yay.
today, and they're directed toward Pablo Torre.
Oh, what happened?
I mean, he's next to Samson in New York, and so there's an avalanche of Pablo Torre merch on our site. There was more merch for Pablo Torre than there was for our people. Like, it was weird, and it's just because he's got a bunch of an army of assassins up there just marching around, finding out how to, make maximum money.
They're figuring stuff out, Dan.
Do we have someone looking over David doing all this?
No, the store closed for 6 months because I didn't have anyone like David to look over it.
It's an interesting choice to put David Sampson in charge of anything business and expect it to be ethical.
I understand, but Dan, he trusts David Sampson. David Sampson loves Dan, I think.
With business.
It's not that I trust David Sampson. He does love me, and loath as I am to admit it, I also love him. However, we need help with business. Because, Stugotz, many of the problems that you and I have had over the last 2 years come specifically because you and I can't be in charge of the money. Other people are in charge of the money. Mm-hmm. And when other people are in charge of the money, Stugotz gets mad that he's not in charge of the money.
I like to have the money in my own pocket.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying?
You deserve to.
Thank you.
So how do you think David did with his first crack at it?
I genuinely believe that David loves you, by the way, Dan. I just think he loves money more.
And Pablo.
Yeah, well, this was your first experience with David doing something like this. How did it go for you?
I would say generally when any corporate gets involved, the soul of that thing dies. And it doesn't matter whether it's corporate at Apple or ESPN or here, but some corporate is required because you cannot have creative people running anything because look at what happened to United Artists. You unite the artists and they go bankrupt because you need people who can handle money and know how to manage money so that the creatives aren't fighting over all the money. So it went terribly.
Okay.
Nothing personal is the name of David Sampson's podcast. There's still.
Why are you promoting it?
Because all week we will have with a discount code on our merch site. If you use Samson Sucks, I've been doing this a while, Stugotz, you can trust me. It'll lead to places.
Right.
Samson Sucks 20
So have I.
is the code that you use if you want a 20% discount on everything that's at the store. But I want the Homer opinion of Greg Cody on what is happening right now with the Miami Dolphins, with the understanding, again, because this part is, it really has been normalized. I'm watching the game. My wife and I have grown to hate Sundays because of how shitty I feel at the end of Sundays because I can't go be with my wife because I have to be worried about whether the Titans punter had 2 kicks blocked.
Me and Abby love Sundays. Well, I love Sundays. You're not doing Sundays right. I mean, you'll get there, Dan.
Thank you. Yeah. But you are watching football and smoking marijuana all Sunday. I would like to be with, you've said it.
Marijuana.
I mean, I'm eating marijuana.
You've said you use a bong on Sundays. Like,
well, I do.
I'm just using your words. I don't know what your smoking habits are.
It starts with a gummy. The bong really just brings it home. That's all.
Yeah, it does. People still use bongs, huh?
So that's what he's doing on Sunday. But so I want you to imagine this, right? Because my wife stays away from I really don't want to be at a point in my life where I have to care about these things this way because, we've been doing this a long time. And I don't want to care about whether that was a catch for the Arizona Cardinals tight end or not. And the announcers are telling me, the 3 of them are telling me it is a catch. And then they rule on the field it's not a catch. And that's what I'm watching as what's being normalized is, Stugotz, and I don't know if this weekend was worse than most or whether I just noticed it more. The phrase I heard more than any other during the weekend was blue medical tent. Like, that's what I heard again and again and again. And so my wife, imagine this through the prism of somebody who doesn't have any understanding of what's happening, where every other word is something about a concussion or someone's limping off the field or stuff. And she's looking at me and she's like, does everybody watch it this way where, it's 5 or 6 hours in a row? And I'm like, no, when they're in London, it's 12 hours in a row, the way that people watch this. And she's asking, what else is like that? And I'm like, nothing. Nothing in the world? Nothing in the world is like that where people sit in front of their television all day and it's a religious experience and the 96 of the top 100 shows are football shows. But this was the part that really blew her mind. Okay, yes, soccer, fair enough. Football of another kind. This is the part that really blew her mind. I'm like, do you understand that in the 3 hours that I'm watching of this window, there's only in each game about 10 to 11 minutes of actual action. Everything else is standing around. And she looks at me sideways. Like, what? And I'm like, yeah, most of the game, but 2 hours and 50 minutes of the game are not plays being run. Like, it's not people actually moving.
Right. That's why Red Zone was invented, essentially.
Well, that's why it's crack, and that's why hockey and basketball are about to follow here. Like, hockey and basketball are going to try and, like, what they have to do to get young people in the stimulus age is you have to just swamp them with action. It can't be one game anymore. Like, all of this must change. In fact, all of these sports have been way behind it. Like, baseball just figured some of it out, and they're like, okay, if we speed all of this up, but all of them are going to have to hit us with more and more action in order to do. That's how football became king sport, because the action is so furious everywhere, and
the 11 minutes of it.
The 11 minutes of it, that's correct.
Right.
And you're putting it when a lot of people aren't working, and you're making the games so that it's just Saturday and Sunday, and people have time to not sit in their unhappiness at work or whatever it is, the problems with their spouse, and they can just watch the television for 9 hours and escape in that.
I've had to spend so much time on social media for my job that I've been trying recently to disconnect from social media a bit when I'm not getting paid to be there. And I tried to watch a Thursday night football game a few weeks ago without Twitter and was so bored. There's so much time between plays. I cannot watch a game that doesn't have some sort of other something going on, which is why Red Zone is kind of the only way to watch NFL Sundays.
What's wrong with you guys? Just enjoy a playoff. Take a deep breath. Take a sigh. Just close your eyes for a minute.
Make an in-game
wish I
bet.
could.
I mean, do something.
Was it Seahawks Cowboys? Because that game was very
Not that
exciting.
one.
All right.
The one
I was at
before
Pacers
that?
Heat that night.
The one before that.
One game is hard now. I think we've all changed our habits enough that people are a bit drunk on stimulus.
What happened to football, the game itself just being enough? Just being enough to entertain you. That you need to be on social media gauging everyone's reaction to every single thing that's happening during said game.
Yes.
Just sit down, like Chris said, and watch the game.
Stugotz, you are coming from a different time, as I am, on all of this stuff. So Leslie Ann Wade has put on Twitter, I don't expect many to read this, but if you are forward-thinking in the sports media or PR business, it is thought-provoking. How Gen Z is killing sports media as we know it. And Dan Shaughnessy, the old-time Boston Globe sports writer, who longs for the same time that you do, Stugotz, the time when he was in charge and he was the media, says it's over. Dan Shaughnessy says it's over, has been for a while, just grateful we got to do it when there were actual smart, thoughtful fans/readers. So now this is old people telling young people, you're not smart because you're changing everything. And this is what happens to the old person. Someone climbs into his mentions with good riddance, Dan. Maybe on your way out the door, you can drive down to New York and pick up that other curmudgeon, Phil Mushnick, at the Post, and you can sit in your rocking chairs and complain about how much better everything used to be 30 years ago, back when you mattered.
I can understand the lament if I felt full confidence that the generation that has all the management positions and is making all the decisions to appeal to these consumers had exhausted every effort to appeal to them and to push creative limits. But to just blame the consumer and disassociate yourself with responsibility when it happened on your watch, I mean, aren't these the legacy media members that are sometimes writing think pieces to fire coaches because something bad happened on their watch? To just put it on the consumers is a bit lazy.
There's all sorts of ways to make sports entertaining after the game has happened, too. I think the issue is that you don't have as many Gen Z people watching these games in live moments, like watching the full game or watching anything like that. But if you go on TikTok and you see some of the creators who are creating storylines after the fact, who are going through and breaking down something that's happened, whether it's a couple of plays from a game or the narrative surrounding a player, like Tyrese Halliburton right now having the moment that he's having, you'll see all sorts of really cool ways of storytelling afterward that they are interacting with. The thing is that the people in charge haven't figured out how to make money off of that yet.
Dan, that's unfair. I would like to call out the person who sent that to Dan Shaughnessy. He'll always be relevant. I mean, that guy could fire up an 85 Celtics book, whatever he wants, with a different angle, and it's a bestseller. Guaranteed. He just did it. He just did it like 3 months ago, and if he wants to do it again, he will, and it will sell out.
I have to be awed by the amount of media, sports media things the Boston area has birthed, because the Boston area cares about sports in an unreasonable way. And I remember 15 years ago talking to you and saying, do you realize that our show would never work in Boston? They care too much about their sports in a way that's unreasonable, that has identity in it. And if we're sitting around talking about stupidities like the Art Basel traffic that's going to make me crazy over the next few weeks, there's no time for that in Boston, where they want to talk about somebody's bunt. But let's get to the reason that we've got the most magical historian and Homer here, and let's get all his excited thoughts on the Miami Dolphins.
Well, I wrote.
This is the new and unimproved Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz. Gamble on by DraftKings.
I don't know what to do about Pablo Torre. He is rising up the charts. It is going to his head. He is getting all the things that he wants from creativity and following his curiosities.
I mean, who put Pablo in charge? Seriously. Who did that? Samson?
Well, he's not in charge. I don't know why you're saying he's in charge.
He's just He's just taking charge.
Yeah.
Which is refreshing.
He is not in charge of anything, and no one put Pablo in charge of anything other than Pablo Torre finds out, which he's been in charge of and been doing an amazing job on. But before we get to the greed and contamination that is his really ruining our merch store.
Oh, okay. Got it. Yeah, we're going to get into greed and contamination and how me being good is actually bad. Got it. Proceed. Yeah.
Yes, we'll get to that in just a moment. But before we do that, I want to tell Angel and whoever can hear the sound of my voice to please create some stew bongs to sell, please, on the merch site. Just figure out how to do that, please. Now, before we get to some subject matter with you, though, Pablo, can you please explain to me why our merch site is contaminated with things for you and your calves and just all about you?
So I just want to explain how it is in the New York studio. Your neighbor, your sibling up in downtown Manhattan. It's kind of like me and David Sampson are kind of like two kids in a trench coat trying to be an adult combined, because there is, as Mike alluded to, a tremendous power vacuum. And so when David Sampson is like, hey, I'm in charge of the merch store now.
Fight through.
He gives. I am full of phlegm, dude. I went to a holiday party on Friday, and I felt like Greg Cody for 3 days.
Thank you.
It's disgusting.
It's the
Are you serious?
Yeah.
You guys could hear that? I was hoping that would sound like a Zoom effect, but no, that's just phlegm. That's just straight up.
That's just a fine.
You said thank you through phlegm.
I did. And inadvertently. You can't plan that. But thank you, Pablo, for whatever you said. I took it as a compliment.
You weren't even listening, were you?
Not really.
It's always,
He said his name.
I always heard my name.
The vibes are always complimentary, even if the words are the opposite.
Thank you.
So for me, what I try to do is when I get an assignment that's like, hey, we have a merch store now. Can you guys create designs? I take that as a mandate from a real media company, because I'm trying to form a smaller real media company inside of the Meadowlark Media, real larger media company. And so I have my guy, Patrick Kim, who was the creative director on Jesus and Marrow, make dozens of designs because I thought that's good. And now I realize that everyone is mad because we did too much homework, I guess, is what I've discovered about working at this company. Being a real media company is bad, is my takeaway so far based on this merch store experience.
Yeah, and this is what happens when money contaminates all things that are meant to be artful and soulful.
You know, I'm with Pablo on this one. We typically have a move where we're unorganized and we're messy, and it's nowhere near as endearing as you think it is, especially when you're in your 50s.
Yeah, but that's the company we're stuck with, and that's what we.
That's who we are.
That's what we have. Unfortunately, I can't do anything about the we're in our 50s, except I'll do it in 6 years when I'm in my 60s. Like I don't know,
Really?
I don't know what to do for you there. Like
Usually a good default as a gag, but we're living the gimmick here.
We're doing this into our 60s?
Yeah, we're living the gimmick.
Hell out of here.
No,
I have the over on that. I have the over on that. I have you guys doing this in your 80s, by the way.
What?
It's funny you should say that, because he says we're living the gimmick, and the way things are going, don't worry, I won't get to my 60s. We won't have to sweat it at all. It'll be fine.
Please live, gimmick. Please live. I have a 3-year-old.
Can you please tell me, okay, before we get to some of the subject matter that I want to get to with you, Grand Theft Auto is about to be, if it's not already, the biggest video game of all time. Like the one that's just released with the trailer that is
It's not. It'll release in 2025.
Bigger than Frogger, huh?
Yes.
It's going to be the biggest, though. It's on track, based on the history of this game, to be the biggest thing in video games ever.
All right, and the one that has been distributed, the trailer that was released, excuse me, because the game was not released, and video games, when we talk about some of this stuff, Greg, about people are now addicted to not just their phones, but to stimuli, and one football game is not enough. The thing that I thought of when my wife asked me, what else is like this where people sit in front of their television for 7 straight hours? The answer is video games. Like
Gaming. Yep.
Gaming is the other thing that's like football. And for Pablo to say this is going to be the biggest one ever, and the trailer was in Miami, and frankly, was so good that I thought it was Miami. Like, I wasn't sure in certain parts of it if it was cartoonish or actually just the way our city is.
Well, Pablo can explain it, but they've spent the reason why this game has been rumored to be released, I think a couple of years ago was the initial release date, but they keep pushing it back. They've mapped the entire city of Miami. Like, they've taken a car around town and they've mapped the entire place. I have a friend that is associated with Space Nightclub. Space is in the trailer. Every nook and cranny of Space is in this game.
There's the Clevelander, or the equivalent in video game Grand Theft Auto world, if you're watching on the DraftKings Network or on YouTube. The Clevelander is there. Jesus Christ.
Good Lord.
That's a fine.
What are you doing? That's
$25.
$10 in fines. What are you doing?
25.
That's what I was
one.
saying.
Yeah.
$15 in fines.
There it is. There it is. But to the artificial imagery that is Uncanny Valley-ish, which is to say that it's so realistic that it becomes unrealistic. There's the Clevelander. At some point, if you're watching this broadcast on the DraftKings Network or on YouTube, I stuck a finger in the air when someone was twerking atop a car. Like, this has gone viral because the butt cheeks are actually vibrating in a way that physics-wise seems incredibly realistic. So, Dan, you are not alone. Despite the fact that Dan Le Batard, his video game expertise extends as far as, I believe, Miss Pac-Man. Clips like this
There you go.
Are making everybody of all ages feel the way that Dan feels at age 6 years shy of 60.
Miss Pac-Man, that's a video game.
That's a video game. I got that in my game room. It's on the fritz right now. Got to get somebody to come fix it because I'm missing it, man.
Did you just say there you go with the same vigor to Miss Pac-Man that you did to twerking? Because I think you said there you go twice.
It was
Did you
perfect.
not?
He said there you go right after twerking was on the screen, but to Miss Pac-Man. So it just seemed like he was saying it to the twerking,
Yeah, no,
which
I did
was
not.
perfect.
I did not do that, although, I approve of twerking, but I did not compliment the reference
But Miss
to it.
Pac-Man is what got you excited.
Yeah, it did.
Right.
Yeah,
A terrible ally for me to have in my addictions to Miss Pac-Man. But this video game, I can't believe how much it looks like Miami. You're talking about the physics of the jiggling and the twerking, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, man, this is our city in almost every way. They've gotten every detail right in all of how asinine and absurd it is, and it's all here in town this month. Like, Art Basel is here, so that entire, like, you could get Grand Theft Auto 6 before 2025, but just going outside anywhere in Miami this month.
Can we get, can Angel make Greg Cody a Grand Theft Auto character? I mean, I feel like the idea that Greg Cody perhaps wearing a shirt, this is another merch store idea, by the way, a shirt that says, quote, I approve of twerking, as he hands out a mission to you as you have to go, I don't know, kill several people in this video game, is the natural, logical conclusion of these worlds colliding.
All right, I just want to make this official because I am tired of the way that Pablo is trying to horn in on everybody's money at the merch store. So
I have ideas.
Good
idea.
That's a good idea,
well,
Pablo.
Here's a good idea.
Because
okay?
it's for you.
Yeah, it's out in the Greg Cody Show merch store right now. We put it out there in the last 10 seconds.
Put it in my merch store. No. Pablo Torre Finds Out can house also a subsidiary of Greg Cody merch. Happy to do that. We got lots of ideas. We got a whole art direction philosophy. We got a team of people who can make this stuff for you, Greg.
Great.
And for me.
Excellent. Thank you.
This last time I was this bored by something is when you guys couldn't stop talking about all your cameos, because whenever there's money around and you guys can make some money, everyone gets to microphones and tries to make. Yeah, it's drying up because you stopped doing that.
No, George Santos is pumping all sorts of new money into it.
Really?
Yep. We have to do a show with him. We have to get him to do a podcast.
All right, not on a Tuesday.
It would be our best. It would be our best rated podcast. George Santos is the most entertaining man in America.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's sign him up. Let's get the people at Mango Publishing and whatever they're doing up there in New York when they're not just fancying Pablo's whims. Let's get all these people together to do a Santos podcast. But I will right now, because it's the holidays, this week, LeBatardAF.com, okay? LeBatardAF.com. If you use the code Pablo Asshole 20, all prices will be increased by 20%.
Wait.
They will be increased, not a discount. They will be all prices will be increased by 20% because I don't want Pablo to have success here because he's had enough success and all of it is going to his head and it's annoying. Now, on Pablo Torre Finds Out, what did you do with these football intelligence tests? Like, did you take one of these football intelligence tests?
Yeah, if you are looking for an episode in which my head is deflated, today's episode is not for you because you may understand that there is this thing that replaced the Wonderlic. And the Wonderlic, of course, was the previous gold standard, quote unquote, for IQ testing in the NFL. That was stopped as a mandatory part of the combine last year. What replaced it is this thing called the S2 test. And as we marvel, Dan, at like how Brock Purdy is now an MVP candidate, who anywhere saw this coming? Well, Brock Purdy aced this thing called the S2 test, the new IQ test that replaced the Wonderlic. Relatedly, Bryce Young aced this test and CJ Stroud bombed it. And so it's been highly controversial. Like the holy grail in sports really is how do we know who's a good quarterback? All scouts are trying to figure out who is good at processing, making decisions. And so the only way that I determined would be fair would be for me to take these tests myself and figure out, is there anything to this or is this all bullshit designed to, sell contracts to teams? And so that's today's episode.
The Wonderlic test always seemed ridiculous to me, and I don't remember who the player was, but I do remember the story most famous for me around the Wonderlic test is true or false, and I like tall women was the question, and whoever the player was just crossed out the T in tall instead of answering the question because they don't take some of this stuff seriously.
I should say that relatedly, as the controversy around these tests build, like Dan Marino got a 16 out of 50 on the Wonderlic.
Right.
So there are lots of guys who've done well. Alex Smith is the guest on today's show. He's a super smart guy, got a 40 out of 50. Dan Marino got a 16. So I don't know if he's the guy who likes women with the tall crossed out, but he might fit the profile based on that method.
Marino failed my test as well. I do the ring test where I check your hand and see how many rings are on it. I mean, it's the best way to do it.
It is the best way to do it.
If I saw a question that was, I like tall women, I would write in there, that's not a question.
Dear God.
Christian Wilkins of the Dolphins is going to be around here shortly, and I think Ron McGill as well to do yet more selling of the book. I do want to think of an idea, though, to try and sell Fins at 50 in a way that gives it a resurgence for Greg Cody, because he seems really disgusted that he's calling this his first book when it's not his first book. And it's not surprising at all that he would call it his first book. And the only reason that he would do that is because the other one didn't get the promotion that he wanted, because he thinks he should be promoted at all times by everybody.
Well, I think that's what he meant. This is the first book that's actually being promoted.
Right.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, it's the first proper book.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's how we pay you for all those back in my days you have not done.
Thank you.
Let's get to this Wes Welker video. The Wes Welker video was interesting because when you think of Wes Welker, Stugotz, the backstory for those of you who do not know. The Dolphins had Wes Welker, and in his Dolphin career, he had one touchdown. He was not a special receiver. In fact, was so not special that he told us the story of one time somebody, just like with Zach Thomas, came out of a place and gave him car keys thinking he was the valet. He told us the story that a neighbor said, upon looking him up and down, they said, "What do you do for a living?" And Wes Welker said, "I'm a football player." And the response that Wes Welker got is, "No wonder we are 1 in 15. So Wes Welker made his way to New England and became a Hall of Famer, or put up Hall of Fame type numbers if he's not a Hall of Famer.
Belichick did one of those things where they played against the Dolphins. He liked Welker. He went and got Welker. That's when we thought Belichick was a genius. He wasn't. He had Tom Brady.
Okay, and that certainly helped, and that made Wes Welker, that turned into Edelman, that turned into Brady and Belichick thinking they could do it with anybody. But when they did it best was when they had Randy Moss. When they did it best, and I remember this one specifically, you probably do too, Greg, the undefeated Patriots. They were totally overwhelming. Better than any of the teams you're watching playing football today, including San Francisco. Undefeated and deserved it. I remember specifically them coming into town, the Patriots of Tom Brady and Randy Moss. Tom Brady threw deep into obvious double coverage, and Randy Moss just jumped over 2 Dolphins and had a touchdown 70 yards down the field. Go look at the difference in Tom Brady's numbers when he had Randy Moss and when he didn't have Randy Moss. It's staggering, the difference, because Randy Moss, by many accounts, is the greatest receiver ever.
He had 50 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. I mean,
a lot of people...
By far his best year.
He is certainly the best deep threat in the history of the sport, but Wes Welker is here to tell you, with all of those as bona fides, like I played with Tom Brady, I was with Belichick, I was with Randy Moss, I know what I'm talking about here. Tyreek Hill is better than Randy Moss because he's more diverse as a route runner than Randy Moss.
I mean, and I all due respect to Randy. I love Randy, and Randy's probably the best deep ball receiver, ever in the game. But Reed can run it all. He can run the whole route tree. He can run choice routes. He can run looky. He can, he can take the top off. He can, his ball skills, the coming in and out of breaks. Name a route you don't like him on. I just can't think of one. And to me, that's what kind of separates him in that regard, and just his mindset and the way he approaches every single day and every single game. It's very, very impressive, and he's got the mentality along with all those things, which is the most important part. And that's probably where he separates himself the most.
I do not want to be a prisoner of the moment. I saw Randy Moss. I think Randall Cunningham was out of the league and became MVP because he had Randy Moss. This is just done for Tua. Something like that was just done for Tua. Tua was not a great quarterback, and suddenly he is a great quarterback.
Yeah, Tyreek Hill's played with Tua, and he's played with Patrick Mahomes. Those are very good quarterbacks. I mean, Randy Moss did it with Randall Cunningham, as you mentioned, Brad Johnson, Jeff George, Todd Bauman, anybody.
With everyone.
Yeah, outside of maybe a slow spell when he was with the Oakland Raiders, he put up numbers with anybody.
And by the way, the Chiefs right now, without Tyreek, I know they were without him last year and did better. The offense is pretty ordinary this year, the Chiefs' offense.
They won a Super Bowl. They won a Super Bowl.
They won a Super Bowl.
Right.
I'm talking about the offense. Greg.
I know.
The offense, last time I looked, was 18th or 20th in the league in scoring. That's middling.
Stugotz.
Patrick Mahomes is not putting up MVP numbers this year.
This is the first time in his career that the defense is better than the offense in Kansas City.
I don't actually think it's confusing. These things deteriorate over time. It doesn't happen from one season to the next. It takes a minute. So the weakening of the offense started last year, and they won the Super Bowl anyway. And this year, the defense is better than that, and they look more questionable to win the Super Bowl because they simply, they lost a game because they couldn't catch one of those deep balls. And in the game we just watched of Miami, because I thought this part was interesting, you have in Tampa. And listen to what I'm saying here, because I just heard Andrew Hawkins. Tomahawk totally found its footing yesterday and had the best day I've seen them have or heard them have. And Andrew Hawkins was talking about Mike Evans has to be considered the best receiver of this time, is what he was saying, because it's 10 straight years of 1,000-yard seasons. And he's saying he's going to keep doing that. And I'm thinking about it for a second. I'm like, I can't be the best receiver of this time. Tyreek Hill came here because he doesn't want to be Mike Evans anymore. He wants to be the guy who makes everyone else. He doesn't want to be Patrick Mahomes' shadow. He wants to be the reason. And what I saw that was interesting yesterday is somebody on Twitter put up that they couldn't explain to me how bad a throw that was that Tua made on one of Tyreek Hill's long balls. And Tyreek Hill's response was, bad take, I ran the wrong route. When Tyreek Hill leaves Kansas City and he tells you it wasn't just about money, that he believes in the things here, Tyreek Hill has supported his quarterback from day one in a way that makes their success shared and makes their bond real, because Tyreek Hill doesn't have to do that. The tweet was celebrating, look at how amazing Tyreek Hill is because of how bad a throw this is. And Tyreek Hill is going out of his way to say, that's my fault. My quarterback threw it in the wrong spot, in the right spot. I ran to the wrong spot.
But to your point, this situation, you're right, Dan, is very different. If he's doing this, and he did, with Patrick Mahomes, no one is talking about Tyreek Hill as the MVP. And right now, they're talking about Tyreek Hill as MVP. Everyone would assign the credit to Patrick Mahomes, some to Hill. Right now, they're giving it all to Tyreek Hill.
But frame it the way I'm telling you. I don't believe there's anyone listening to this who would try to make the argument that Mike Evans is the best receiver of the last 10 years, even though it's an argument that can be made. And Tyreek Hill was tired of that in Kansas City. Stugotz, Mostert has 16 touchdowns. That led the league before McCaffrey played on Sunday.
Yeah.
He's got 16 touchdowns as a product of that offense. He's not the special person in that offense.
And part of the reason he has 16 touchdowns is that the running game benefits so greatly from the deep threat that Tyreek Hill provides. And when I write that Tyreek Hill should be the front runner in the MVP race, part of it is that he has elevated Tua to the point where Tua is right ahead of him in the latest MVP betting odds I've seen.
This is
the quarterback's always going to be.
But this is what's fascinating to me about how we do this to both Mike Evans and Tyreek Hill. Winning is the biggest thing, and then we give the quarterback the biggest thing. You win, we'll give you the credit. Even if you're Tebow, we will give you the credit as being a great quarterback. But we're going to find one way to give the winner the credit or the quarterback the credit. It's why it's not the wide receivers in the commercials. It's the quarterbacks in the commercials.
And the Kelseys.
Yeah, there is an AP NFL Offensive Player of the Year award in which kind of rationalize one goes to one guy, the other goes to the other guy. For what it's worth, Tyreek Hill is presently the betting favorite on AP NFL Offensive Player of the Year.
Right, but the AP has awarded 66 MVP awards. 0 have gone to a wide receiver. Jerry Rice never won. Randy Moss never won. That has to stop if Tyreek Hill is the first ever with a 2,000-yard season and is doing what he's doing for a Super Bowl contender.
Presently for the MVP, Brock Purdy is now leading.
The last 4 years, the Offensive Player of the Year has gone to position players each year. So in 2019, it was Michael Thomas, 2020, Derrick Henry, 2021, Cooper Kupp, and 2022, Justin Jefferson. It reasons to stand, Tyreek Hill will win that this season.
Yeah, it's almost understood that MVP quarterback award, Offensive Player of the Year, we reward the guys that we don't make MVPs.
Right. The Offensive Player of the Year is a consolation prize because you know that a quarterback's going to win the big prize, so you give the consolation to the Tyreek Hills, and that has to change.
Where's Mike McDaniel in the MVP odds?
Put it on the poll, Juju. Where's Mike McDaniel on the MVP odds, yes or no? And it reasons to stand has to become a T-shirt because Jeremy prides himself on being an Emmy-winning broadcaster who speaks correctly, and it reasons to stand is not how you meant to say that.
You're right.
An Emmy-winning broadcaster.
How do you
I
say
am.
it?
Jer Emmy.
Jeremy Tash.
The amazing part about what we're talking about here, I think, is that Tyreek Hill came here to be the reason for winning an offense, and he's succeeded. Like
Pick this over New York.
Where New York was offering him. I want to talk about that for a second.
That was a fun time.
New York offered him $6 million more. $6 million more.
Taxes.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Taxes is part of it, but he makes the argument that it wasn't just taxes. I learned the other day, you know who is the team that hasn't made the playoffs in the NFL for the longest time?
The Jets?
Yeah, it's 12 years. It's 12 years without making the playoffs. I think second place is like Houston, and it's 7 years. Like, it's a stretch of really.
That's going to end.
It's really terrible. And it's not. They're still looking for a wide receiver. But when you talk about the reasons for winning, Stugotz, I was trying to say this yesterday. I now understand with McCaffrey and what he's doing in San Francisco. I didn't understand it at the time, why the Dolphins were trying to get in on Jonathan Taylor and a bunch of other running backs. Because if Mostert can get to 16.
Right.
If Mostert can get to 16 touchdowns, do you turn Jonathan Taylor into McCaffrey by putting him in this offense?
Well, you also follow the San Francisco formula, which Mike McDaniel is very familiar with, which is, load up on talent if you have a reasonable contract at the quarterback position. Now that they've jettisoned Jimmy Garoppolo, they've doubled down on that in San Francisco. Also, let's not disrespect Gabriel Wilson over in New York. He's a pretty special wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
Garrett Wilson, that's fine.
Garrett Wilson, yeah.
I said don't disrespect the man.
You were thinking Gabe Davis. He's up north in New York. Yeah.
He's terrible. No, I just
sometimes he's good.
He is
sometimes
not.
he's
Go
terrible.
Knights.
Yeah, he's confusing, Gabe Davis. I mean, he is.
I look in a mirror here. It brings me great joy to see you being the one screwing up the names. Like I just
little heat off you.
Just a little. I mean, I just a little.